Funny, well, do you want to get any breakfast? I go, do you realize we have to go? So, oh, that's right. See? So, no, that's okay. That's okay.
So, do you guys want us to answer questions first, or do you guys want us to sign down? Whatever you guys want. We usually
need to talk first before we go to sign. Come on,
man. Warm up.
You want us to just get right down to it? Yeah? No foreplay or nothing. Let's just go.
No, I meant of course, if you guys.
First, you want to kiss at least.
I want to do a table. Whatever you guys want.
Well, they don't want to be rushed. They want to be open like a flower. Guy walking us up goes, you guys do everything, you know, drink or smoke? I'm like, do I look like I need any of that stuff to get my wheels rolling? No, I'm on from start to finish. So anyway, good morning. And did we have any of you guys in the previous events yesterday, the panels? You were there? Anybody else? So mostly, a few people, but mostly new people. Right, so, I don't know, we just kind of ramble for a little bit until we see the boredom and the eyes glaze over, and then we move on to the signing. A little early, so, you know, maybe we can talk about what we're doing. How many people picked up metal?
Yeah.
Yeah? Yeah? You guys digging it so far? Yeah?
Oh my gosh.
Well, I just finished drawing issue 3, and we got nothing but more explosive stuff coming. So I hope you hang on for the ride, and I think you won't be disappointed. I think it's the most fun thing that we've done here in DC. So since I've been at DC. So.
Yeah, I just pitched. I was telling him the end of it and everything, and I was like, and then this, and then this, and then this, and then plastic this, and whatever.
Yeah. It's all just great fun stuff. So we're ready to rock and roll with that.
Yeah, and we wanted it to be something that would just remind you guys that kid joy in comics and just blast off this summer. So it's easily the most fun I've ever had writing. The hardest part about it is keeping it contained, because they gave us access to everything. So I want to be like, oh, Starman, oh, Plastic Man, oh, like, you know, like Booster Gold, like everybody that I want to use. Yeah, but they. So the hardest part is just trying to be honest and be like, well, which ones really are absolutely necessary to the story, because you want to use everybody, you know? So it's that fun where it's just there's a lot of people coming that you wouldn't expect to.
So I'll give you a couple behind the scenes stuff, okay? Because you're not privy to it, right? So the cover for issue number 1, you all see that I did that on the cover, right? And so they didn't like that.
And really gonna do it.
And so, you know, I knew what they wanted, you know, because they've been doing comics a long enough time where they wanted to be cosmic shot, we'll call it like a Star Wars movie poster type thing with, you know, the upshot of the Jade, you know, Justice League America and all that good stuff. And I've gone, you know, I've seen that, as you've all seen that, you know, a zillion, trillion times. And does it work? Of course it works, and, you know, that's why they do it a zillion, trillion times. And I worked like 3 days, you know, trying to come up with ideas that weren't that. And then, so all of a sudden, on like day 3 of, you know, racking my brains, that occurred to me. And so I was so happy. And then I agree to them, they go, hey, you know, I don't know about this cover. Can you just give us this big, cosmic kind of Star Wars poster upshot of the JLA or something? And I was like, oh man, you gotta be kidding me. I go, this is fun. I go, it doesn't do what you're after, that's true. I go, I want to capture more of the spirit of this event. And so they go, well, how about we save it and put it on issue 5? And that was something that was misconstrued, because what I did was I sent them an email to throw it in their face that I wanted to do the turn in issue 5, and they fought me on that. It turned out to be a great success. So I was like, you know, issue 5, and they're like, yeah, maybe we can save it till issue 5. I'm going, oh no, that's stupid. We can't do it. So anyway, we got through and we got that cover. Okay, so then Scott, following my lead now, he said to me for the cover 6, he goes, I want to do something that seems, and I can't spoil the cover because it's cool, but he goes, I want it to seem like, you know, the end of a rock show. You know, what can we do for a cover that is like the end of a concert, a heavy metal concert or something like that? So I cooked something up, so now when you get to it, pretend you're at the end of a Kiss concert and this is the final encore, okay? And And that's kind of what I went for with that. So we got bookends, sort of heavy metal covers.
I love it so much. And by the way, just to be fair, I love this cover. I was on his side from the moment you showed the sketch, and I was like, wait a minute, is that the horn? You know what I mean? I was like, oh.
And they go, well, I don't think everybody's going to get it. And I go, I know, but that's part of the fun, because the people who do get it will point out that people don't get it, and it'll just be a talking point and something that's kind of cool and fun instead of, the cover that looks great and forgotten in a week or month.
I love that Batman is the thumb.
Well, that was, I'm going, how do I make a thumb? Right? And so the cape, that was the only thing I could think of, right? And then to be honest with you, right, I didn't factor in Aquaman, right? Because I was just looking for the right amount of digits. And so then after the fact, I was on Twitter, and a couple people were going, hey, where's Aquaman? Does Aquaman die? And all this going on. Oh, man. I gotta get Aquaman somewhere, so I put the trident tattoo on the wrist. So he's represented by a tattoo, which is metal, right? So I go, it works. But it was really because I was just counting how many I needed, and I left off Aquaman unintentionally. So I love Aquaman, especially with long hair and beard. He's totally rocking.
Someone suggested putting him in like a fetal position as the palm.
I'm scared. So anyway, that was one of the first behind the scenes things that's happened so far. And just in case you don't know,
the title too, though they hated.
Oh, they hated the title too. And now you got D running around in long wigs with a blow up guitar. So I guess he came on board too. But what are some of the names that they wanted? Like
dark. It was like a Dark Crisis, or dark
Batman
Crisis.
Fusion Jazz. It's like didn't have the right ring to it.
No, it was funny because when I was kind of making up the story for Greg long before we took our break. I had the ideas for some of it. And then when I knew they wanted us to do an event, when he got back, I really started putting it together in earnest and studying events. And it's one of the reasons I kind of stepped away from the double ship and the continuity comics, even though All-Star was in continuity, but stepping away from the real mainline comics was to be able to have some time to work on this and think about it. And so I had this whole pitch, and the first thing I remember, I was like, it's a dark multiverse, which is this crazy realm beneath the multiverse where all of our fears and hopes live, and the bad guy will pluck 7 of the worst versions of Batman out, and there'll be 7 Dark Knights. And I was going to pitch to him, and he and Jamie, his wife, were over at our house. And I was like, I have this story coming. I think I have it together. It's going to be awesome. It's called Metal. And he was just like,
yes!
Again! But in my mind, I had like a whole PowerPoint, where I was like, but with DC, the funny thing was that they've always been very kind to us. So, I've had my fights with them, and he's had his fights with them, over the years, especially when I was starting out. But lately, since we were doing well on Batman, they've given us a lot of latitude. And with this one, though, they really at first they just weren't sure what it was supposed to be. And I was like, it's this Kirby-ass, crazy-ass, evil Batman attack the DCU, rock show, blah, blah, blah. And it was just not a good elevator pitch because there's so many crazy things. But and so at first they were like, they wanted to call it like Dark Horizons and Dark this and whatever. And can I split it into 2 and have this be the evil Batman? Because everybody wants the evil Batman, right? And then do all the cosmic stuff later. They asked that if we could do the second 6 issues that you're going to do later. So I was telling him, and I'm like really pissed off at them, and I was like, no, I'm just going to keep calling them and bothering them. And he was like, why are you doing that? He was like, just don't call them back. And I was like, what do you mean don't call them back? They're the boss, I have to call them back. And he was like, just don't call them back, watch, follow my lead.
Go Radio Black is what I said.
And I was like, but my MO is the opposite, is to just badger them and yell at them until they finally cave because they can't deal with it anymore, where my extension pops up, I'm sure, and they're like, wow.
Whereas I'm a proponent of psychological warfare.
So it was so hard for me to see the phone ringing all the time. It was Warner Brothers, whatever.
Which is exactly what I knew would happen.
Yeah, but I followed his lead, and it was like within 2 days they were like, fine, you can call it Metal.
Because what happens, right, is somebody's imagination starts to try and get into your psyche. Why is he going to call? What's he thinking? Maybe he quit, right? So you can use this, folks, at work or in relationships. It works great, however you want to, with family, however you want to do it, What do you want for dinner tonight, honey? It works on multiple levels, so feel free.
He still uses it on me with text.
No, I don't know. Well, a little bit.
To bust my balls, like once in a while, like when I
Once in a while.
Well, I'll send them a script and be like, "How'd you like it?" And then I don't hear anything back.
Well, no, I usually go, cool. And then I get, was it just cool? Is it up to par? Is it great? Did you really like it? Yeah, and so I know what he's after because I've been with him for years. He needs, complete adulation.
I do.
It's the best thing ever. If I didn't have to eat food, I'd eat this. Now that it's a game to us, so he'll send me the thing and I'll wait, radio black, and then I'll go, no, it's completely fine. Just completely fine. It's not great, and so then I'll give him little pieces by little pieces, and then I'll start sending emojis that show him just on the floor laughing, dying at his pain. Because if I love you, I want to hurt you.
You know what I miss? For some reason, it doesn't do it anymore. But my computer, I used to send you blank emails whenever you sent.
Oh yeah. He'd respond, and I'd receive an email that had no body. And so I'd go, yes, another success. He loved it.
It was whenever he sent in a page. For some reason, that email chain with Dan and Bob and Jim Lee and all those, when I responded, it would come back blank. And I would write these nice things about, I love that, whatever, but it was always blank. So then it became a joke between us that, if I love it, I just send a blank email.
and this brings to mind a funny tale, which, to me, I still can't get over why Scott never got a clue, but he would send me for years, since we began, the scripts. In the body of the scripts, he would have pictures, included photographs and things like that he collected off the internet to try and give me the idea that he was going for. And whatever program I was using, I never saw any of the pictures. For years, I never saw any of the pictures. So I had no idea. And yet this guy, he doesn't see that I'm probably not going anywhere close to the pictures, continues to send the pictures. And then many years later, I get this program, then all of a sudden I go, there's pictures in these things. There's even a picture of him making this maniacal Joker face at the camera. But the most hysterical one was, when we got Gordon to be Batman and Bruce has a beard. He actually sent me a picture of a beard. And I'm going, wow, really? I go, so while the wife is there, and the kids are there, maybe it's dinner time, they're calling, Scott, where are you? He goes, I just have to find a picture of a beard to send to Greg. And you go, wow. So, but anyway, he never in those years of me not going anywhere close to what he was showing continued. I have to send the picture. Sorry, honey, I'll be down in a minute. Go. So.
Well, most of them were just to be fair. I love when you would take your own direction with it. It was never something where I wanted.
I had no choice. I never saw the pictures.
Well, most of the pictures were references to make it easier, like this. It would be the building from a comic book, the continuity stuff that I didn't want him to have to look up. So yes, I did overdo it.
But I'm going to save that Scott Snyder looking like a crazy man into the camera. The Joker would be like this. You're adorable. I love you. I still want my Scott Snyder plushie doll.
Do you guys have questions for us at all, or anything you want to ask too that we can?
We'd love to answer anything. Yeah.
So for some people who might not know, you guys, everyone knows you guys are fantastic together as a team. But when you guys started off, it was kind of a rocky relationship. I don't know if you can...
Oil and water it was, and now we're kind of oil and vinegar. We don't taste too bad on a salad, I guess, these days. But early on, wow, the ground was almost splattered with blood. The skies went black. And, there was I've told this story so many times. I'll tell it again for the few who haven't heard it because I think it's funny. In the beginning, now I've been doing this for a long time, compared to Scott, who's maybe 7 years or something like that. I've been doing them 25 years, something like that. Anyway, so, and as an older person, you maybe get a little more wisdom, so you have a little bit more patience. I don't know what it is, but so Scott. First, let me say that the way I was trained, I worked at Marvel Comics, and they trained you to work off of a plot, which was bare bones stuff. And then I worked with McFarlane. You guys heard of that guy? Yeah, it's McFarlane. So, and he used to get on the phone with me and give me the basic overview of things, and I'd write down notes, and we put it together that way. And so then when I saddled up with Scott, for the first issue of Court of Owls, like over 50 pages it seemed came off my printer. I'm replacing the cartridges in the paper, going, what is going on? I'm going, what is this? And then I get this thing that's fatter than like a trade paperback. And I go, wow. So I go, Scott, I don't need all this. Just send me the important words. And he fired back, all the words are important. And I'm like, that's not really true, just give me the high points. And so then he starts to go, well, I'm known to pretty damn good with these words, and I've won this award and that award. And he's just like, and so, I'm reading this, and I'm trying to think of the response. And my wife, in the meantime, she's over my shoulder, loving wife, she's protective of her husband. She's going, who does he think he is? Look at what tell him. And so I'm going, just relax. Okay, so I go, I'm sure your mother is very proud. And Scott is such a sweet guy, which is one of the reasons I want the plushie doll. He didn't even realize I kicked him in the nuts. He writes back, yes, I come from a very close-knit family, and they're very supportive. And he says a long letter about his wonderful family. And I'm going, oh, wow, this kid, he didn't even realize I just smashed him. So, anyway, so after this, DC kind of was trying to push us apart because, Scott protesting and maybe wanting to not work with me at all. And my wife is still, and I just go, once he sees, that I'm not going to drown his baby, everything will smooth out. And that started to happen, and then Scott and I disobeyed the wishes of editorial and started to talk to each other. And that's when we kind of just realized we're both on the same page. He cares intensely about his craft, and I certainly care, maniacally intense about my end of the craft, obsessive. I'm just stupid about it. And so we our common ground there, and then our feelings toward Batman, and yet we love the character as much as any fan loves the character, and we wanted to do right by the character. You have to do right by Batman because fans are crazy. They'll kill you if you don't do it right. If you mess up Batman, you are dead. So, but anyway, once we realized we were in common ground, and then even a lot of our storytelling sensibilities are also the same, a lot of things we would pace in the same manner, and so on and so on. It just became, more friendship based, and we did build a quality friendship. And then Scott would continue he'd write his scenes the way he envisioned them, and sometimes I would not do them at all that way because I didn't feel they worked on the page. Would work fantastic in a movie, but maybe not so well on the comp page. So Scott would always at the end of, and this leads me into the next reason why I want a Scott Snyder plushie doll, is he would describe the scene and say, whatever you want, with an exclamation point and a smiley face. So you go, I love this guy. I love my Scott Snyder plushie doll.
Well, also, like, the thing is, when we started, neither one of us knew, or I didn't know at least, that it was going to be Batman #1. And I was saying, yeah, yesterday, I wasn't ready for that pressure at all. I was still a baby comic writer, and I had thought that maybe by this point in my career, 7 years in, maybe I'd get a crack at Detective Comics or whatever. So to suddenly be catapulted like that into the spotlight, I was just really scared. And I was constantly talking to my wife about, I don't know if I can do this. It was causing me
I had the same conversations.
Yeah, it was keeping me up at nights, and I was just terrified. So, and one of the few comforts was that they had initially told me when I moved to Batman that I'd be with the same team as Detective. But then when it was going to be Batman #1, well, I wanted someone, that was going to be a big surprise to people that they were coming over and all of that stuff. So, all of it caught me off guard. You know what I mean? So I was a total dick when Greg first came over. It was my bad. I was. I get it. I was.
He's got it on film.
I do.
But I was just, it really, he knows this now, and he knows me well enough to know that's how it is with me. But I was terrified, and I just didn't know what I was doing at that time, and I wasn't ready for that pressure. But one of the things that was great about working with him is that you guys probably have your favorite issues that you love because of the story and the art, and I have those too, In fact, like when he showed me the cover, when I just saw the cover of 60 Metal, it's the first time I ever asked him, I was like, if there is any way I can get the grab bag or the sketch for this thing, I love it so much. But I have my favorite issues because it's story and stuff, but for me, I look at our whole run and I have my favorite issues are the ones where I look back and remember where we were in our friendship and what I learned creatively or what we learned about each other at different moments. And so when we started, it was like, just like he said, where I started to see all these designs for the talents, and I was like, God, this guy really goes to the mat.
He's got that on film too.
Yeah. Well, and it was like I saw a kindred spirit in that he would go back over and over and really was putting his heart into it. And to be fair, like a lot of guys that are at that stage who've made a really big career for themselves or a big name for themselves, it's not like they have to phone it in, but they can phone it in and still do really good stuff and whatever. And the fact that Craig came and, the farthest thing from his MO is ever to phone it in, to the point where both of us are crazy about it. I think we try and keep each other in check where he sees me going way too far with things like over and over and over, and I'll see him sometimes too, that I just knew like, oh, this is the right guy. And then seeing the designs, they blew my mind. And I remember, just to tell a quick story, like issue 5 for me is one of those moments, you guys I know because it's so much fun when you turn it, but that was a moment when I realized how much I had to learn in comics and what a good partner he would be for that too, because up to that point I had still been writing scripts that were generally full script, but I had said in them, please change whatever you want, like that smiley face, whatever. But I was still pretty nervous, like that if I let go of it. And the people I had worked with before, Jock and them, always liked full script up to that point, or at least said they did. So I just sort of thought I was giving people what they wanted. And then with 5, it was the first time ever I was like, with this one I want it to be disorienting. I'm just going to change the way I write it. And that whole sequence in the labyrinth, I really didn't put in a lot of panels or anything. I just said these are the things he comes across. But anything you can think of to make it more disorienting. And Greg came back with the idea of turning the book. And then they fought us on it at first, and we're like, everyone's gonna think it goes backwards. That's another thing. And they were like, everyone's gonna think it's a misprint. And he wrote this really impassioned email where he was like quoting Steve Jobs or all this stuff. And I was like, yeah, when he said, yeah. And then they caved and they let us.
Stay foolish was the Steve Jobs quote.
Yeah, that's right.
Stay foolish.
I remember. And then they caved and let us do it. And then I saw the digital printout of it because they send us like a PDF first, right? So I saw it and I was like, these pussies, it's not too bad. Look at that. It doesn't look too bad because you read it scrolling down. And then the physical book came, and you have to turn it and then read it backwards for a minute. And I was like, oh God, there's a misprint in this book. And I remember, and so I went to Twitter and I was like, oh, everybody that gets number 5, everything in it is deliberate. And he texted me, he's like, what are you doing? Take that down. Told me a pussy. He's like, if they get it, they get it. If they don't, they don't.
And then, pause this part of the story. Okay, so then, now I would have gone methodically through these pages to make sure there was no mistakes. And I was on the phone with the editor. And so then it turns on this page, yes. And then it turns on this page, yes. And so I had it all done and all through. And as he said, he took to Twitter because he had seen stuff, the archive before I did. And he's freaking out. And I'm like, hey, knock that out, take that down. And then I get my actual physical copy. And I'm flipping through it, making sure it's all right. And then all of a sudden, it looks wrong to me because now I have to start turning in the opposite direction, which I never thought of that ahead at the time. I knew where I wanted all the breaks, but I never go, yeah, you'll have to start going the other way. And I start freaking out, and now I'm upset. And I'm going, they messed it up on me. And I'm ready to call the editors and cuss them out and everything like that. And then they go, wait a minute, it has to work this way. This is even better. And so, but it caught me on the hook too. And so anyway, back to your Twitter.
Yeah, and he was like, didn't you post? I think you posted something where you were like, there's a goddamn misprint.
No. I wrote the letter to the editor.
Oh, all right.
What did you do?
I couldn't remember which it was, but for me, like that was also it was oh go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think Scott's that felt, and so did editorial, still feel we should let them know, the public, you guys, that it's not a misprint. And I go, don't worry about it. Let it go, because they're gonna figure it out, and the ones who don't figure it out, the ones who did figure it out will explain to the ones that didn't figure it out, and it'll all work out in the end. And it really did, because all you guys, no matter what show I did, more close to when we went out, everybody loved that issue and commented on that issue. And so now I use it constantly whenever I have a battle at DC. I just whisper in their ear, issue 5.
Well, and for me, the other thing is like that it really did, that getting that issue and seeing it beyond thinking it was a misprint. It's one of the ones I'm proudest of because I just think it's a killer issue all overall. But B, the reason I like it even more is because I can look at it and say, I remember exactly, this was the moment I realized that the more room I give an artist, and Greg especially, the better the product will be. And it was a huge leap for me, just a growing moment as a writer. And in our friendship, because it was the first time we really stuck up for each other to DC about something like that, where, they really didn't want to do it. And so, yeah, I mean, it's fun because I look back at our run, it's 5-6 years. I didn't have a second kid when we started, you know what I mean? It's all this, we've been through tons together as friends, and he's seen me through rough times, and, I've seen him through things as well. And so I look back at it, and there are all those moments like that where there's a story point where I'm like, oh, I love that so much, but it's also really nice to get to look back and be like, there's almost a private one where I can be like, I remember what happened with the making of this issue and all that stuff too, that cements both, I think, our friendship, but also I don't know, I look at it, I can look at points where I've learned a lot getting to work with you. And
right now, in my head, I'm rocking my Snyder plushie down.
So, yeah, no, I'm very grateful for it, yeah. Who else?
Okay. A lot of the criticism for the New 52 in general was the fact that Batman and Green Lantern never rebooted.
Yeah.
So, do you ever look back and wonder what would it have been like if you had a full reboot?
Yeah, no, I mean, what he asked, if you didn't hear it in the back, was that a lot of the criticism for the New 52 was that Batman and Green Lantern didn't fully reboot. They kind of kept their continuity, whereas a lot of characters did fully reboot, like Wonder Woman and a bunch, pretty much everybody. No, I was at the time, because it's funny, because I wound up, at the time, I was completely adamant about that, where I was like, I do not want to change Batman's origin and Batman's backstory and erase his family and all these characters that people love. So I was actually quite frightened that I was on the wrong side of history at that time, that what am I doing? I'm losing an opportunity to redo Batman's whole mythos in our own way. So I was scared of that I was making a mistake, but Jeff Johns did the same thing with Green Lantern, and I felt like if he was doing the right thing with it, I hopefully was doing the right thing with it. But there was a lot of pressure the other way too, to really not reference the family, not reference the stuff that had come before. But I tried to make that issue one that made you feel like he's standing with all his boys, and you get the sense that all the stuff that you love was still there. So that was just a decision that I felt really strongly about. And then, weirdly enough, as the 52 went on, it became clear to me about 2 years in that the origin and the history of Batman in terms of year one wouldn't fit anymore, because Gordon had a new origin, Selina has a new origin, all of that. So that story no longer made sense. And at that point, DC was like, you never did the origin of Batman. Do you want to go do that? And at first I was like, no. And then, to be totally honest, what happened was my kid, my older boy at the time, was at school. This is kind of a weird story, but he was at school and they had a lockdown drill, which they have now, shooter drill. I know it's terrible. And he was only, at the time, he was what, 3 or 4. And they didn't realize that he was getting a drink of water. And so they locked the doors and they closed the doors and he was left in the hallway. And so he wouldn't go to school from that day forward all year without a thermos, because he never wanted to leave the room for anything. And I really remember talking to him, and I swear it was the weirdest thing, where I was like, this realization, I was having the same conversation at DC, that his fears and my kids' fears were intensely different than mine as a kid. The things they worry about, gun violence and superstorms and terrorism and North Korea, all this stuff is just different than what I had as a kid, and those things were addressed in year one in Dark Knight Returns in so many relevant ways, that why don't I try and do something that's an origin that speaks to them and is a total flip aesthetically and is bonkers, punk rock, just totally nuts, you know, over the top, 12 issues instead of a tight, grim. And so that's when I started thinking about it, and I pitched it to him and FCO and Danny at the time, and was like, you know, if we do it, I just want it to feel like the anti-Year One, where it's about, it feels kinetic and weird and post-apocalyptic and fun, and it's totally ours. And so I was really proud. That's secretly probably Up to Metal, my favorite story that we did for that reason, because I wrote it for my kids. About he goes up against the things that I want them to be brave in the face of. So I'm really happy with how it came out, is what I mean. Like, I'm glad I didn't reboot it initially, because I felt strongly about that. And then when I did get a chance to do a new origin for Batman, it was kind of on our own terms, and we had felt comfortable with it. Yeah, to your question.
Yeah, what kind of combo question, like, I know that DC has really, like, you know, let the reins a little bit on the more grittier, like, you know, story that you're allowed to write, but they still have, you know, kind of a chokehold on grittier, like, artwork and things like that. It's like this, like, kind of tick you guys off that you really can't go over that line, because it's like, well, my story can go here, but, you know, your art can only go here.
Well, you know, the art, I mean, we've gone a little bit far. It's not like the stuff you can get away with if it's something in Image or something like that. But, you know, the reason you go a little bit grittier, right, is because the world has gone a little bit grittier. And sadly, you know, kids grow up a lot faster than you know, previous generations, you know, through not only what's going on in the world, but with video games and stuff like that, which, you know, so over the top of the violence. But, you know, the thing is, you got to come to terms when you work for, you know, one of the big two, Marvel or DC, that these are publicly owned companies, you know. Warner Brothers owns one, Disney owns the other, and, you know, so you have to play within those, because they're answering the shareholders. So, you know, I think sometimes it gets a bit ridiculous, you know, beyond the stuff you mentioned. I remember with Joe Quesada having a conversation, when Joe Quesada decided Wolverine can't have a cigar anymore, I'm going, this is getting too much. This is like when they edited the Bunny cartoon. Daffy Duck, blast Elmer Fudd. Oh my God, the kids might think it's real. You know, there's lines where it goes a little too far, but, you know, I don't know. I think the line that we're able to go is far enough. You still, I draw some pretty gory stuff.
Yeah, I keep thinking of like the Joker's rotting face, like.
There's blood, you know, sliced off faces and whatnot, and you know, knives stuck in Batman's back or whatever. But yeah, I couldn't go farther. But yeah, does it help the narrative? Not so much. That's more of a thrill moment for people who are into that. A lot of people aren't into that stuff. But like when I did Haunt with Robert Kirkman, he loves evisceration. You know, yes, guts everywhere. You know, and the people like Robert Kirkman like that kind of stuff, right? And they seek it out. So I don't find it too restricting. You know, I'm happy with the yard that they let me play in. You know, and so I'm cool.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I think, you know, I don't try and write it for us, so I'm never trying to write, you know, out of the comfort zone of like to write just for kids or write just for adults. Try and write it for something that like is somewhere in between, like the kind of stuff that I would pick up, you know, and read. And I love that sort of violence too, and I have a place to do a lot of really dark stuff like Image and do Witches and Severed and those where they get really, really black. But with this, I think the thing, I worry things, but it's the torture, it's the evil in him and the torture that he kind of perpetrates that makes him scary.
I helped the writer just then.
Lately, it's funny because I was bad the other day, but I feel like you used to like I used to talk less than you, I talk more than you, and now I feel like you talk as much as me. And then text,
if I don't dominate, I won't be able to get a word in edgewise. That's just the reality.
And then I use more emojis in text now. I'm getting lazier. You write more eloquent text than I do.
His texts are usually like this long, and I respond with a couple emojis. That's about it, you know. And then he'll write me another big long text. The other day he tried to play my game, and he sent me just emojis, and I was like, he's learning it. He's getting it.
Yeah, that was good. Well, I had learned to do the different colors. I was like, look at this. Like all the colors. And then he was like, writers. And then I did one of all the writer hand emojis, but in all different colors. Who else?
I think one of I was just gonna ask how it was like writing this, because like my favorite thing that I saw was the middle two right now. I think that's Like
Yeah.
someone actually stumped Batman. Like that was, how was writing that? Because like, I feel like that's something that's not really been done a whole lot.
Yeah, well, I knew with this story, if we were going to do it, I needed to take him to the lowest place that we've taken him. You know, Portobello's, all of them, we hurt him pretty bad, but this one was one where I wanted to just make him feel, because here's the thing, the story is crazy fun, and we had a chance, like, it was funny, because when you asked your question, I was thinking about this, like, with Super Heavy, for example, I got to do a story that was not, you know, explicitly about the moment in time or openly political in any way, but came a little bit closer to sort of asking questions that were about, well, what if Batman was real? Could he help us with some of the problems that we have in our institutions and stuff? So Jim Gordon as Batman wanted the police to be trusted, and he also, on the other side, there was different kinds of, it was, you know, so it wasn't, I'm never trying to put my, my political beliefs on top of Batman, because I feel like Batman is somebody for everybody in that way, and his job is to inspire you regardless of what side of the aisle you sit on. You know, and I have a place for that in social media and all that stuff. But with metal, because things, it's almost like because things are darker, like you were saying, things are grittier, in the way that regardless of what side you are on politically, we're all at each other's throats all the time, and it's stressful and it's divisive, and regardless of what you want to happen, it's just, you can, you know, it's a crazy time right now, right?
I just want to finish with what I'm working on before we get blown up. That's, you know, talking about nuclear war, I just want to finish.
Yeah,
I'll be very upset if I can't finish.
Well, and the trick
I put a lot of work in so far. Don't interrupt me.
I can see us-
Bomb everybody later.
I can see us
I'm finishing.
I can see us in like our Mad Max gear, still working, mohawk and like shoulder pads, and you're like, we're in a cave. Anyway, but with metal, like the trick is to, every arc was always about saying something really personal or you know, that you believed in passionately. It's what I teach my students, and you know, that sense of if Super Heavy was about what does it matter that we all love Batman if he affects nothing in the real world? Meaning, even if he was real in Gotham, could he do anything? You know what I mean? Like if somebody real said, "I'll be Batman," and metal. The key is almost like, if I'm going to give you something that I feel is personal, I always try and figure out, is this one that I can do more explicitly and darkly, like Endgame, or is this one that I'm going to switch and do over-the-top bonkers fun, like Zero Year, because it's harder to spoon-feed in some way, something like that. And Super Heavy had to be crazy. So with this, the thing I'm getting at is that, for what you were asking, a scene like that where Batman really gets taken down, this one's really about those moments in your life, you know, and I never pitch it this way because it's not something that I want you to, it first and foremost, it wears its heart on its sleeve in terms of the fun, Kirby-esque, out-of-control, cosmic odyssey zaniness of it, and that's what it's about, celebrating, you know, comic bonkersness, but it's about those moments in your life when you wake up like Batman does here, and he sees everything he thinks that he's achieved, all the things that he thinks that he's accomplished, and the way that he's proud of himself suddenly get flipped on him, and they say, oh no, all of that just led you to a place to fall harder, and you've just been a fool, and everything forward, here are all the terrible things you didn't see about yourself, all the versions of yourself you don't like. They're all here, and they're real, and they're coming, and there's nowhere to go but down from here. And that, you know, I've had moments like that, and he's seen them, and I wanted to write a story that got that.
Days like that.
I wanted to write a story that felt emotional like that, where you believe that Batman would get there, but not make it depressing. Instead, make it something that said, how do you get through, and why does Batman matter, and all of that? Because these comics are so fun and inspiring, and got me through times as a kid and all of that, because they're so zany and out there, and they celebrate our imagination and the awesomeness of sort of the breadth of where we can go with them in the medium as opposed to other mediums, you know. So I love that scene, but that's why it's kind of designed that way, and it gets he goes to a really dark place, but I hope throughout, like, it's almost sort of, it's so fun you can't help but keep following it down the rabbit hole, you know.
Red Hat.
How much is metal going to affect the rest of the DC universe?
A lot. It's going to affect it a lot. Doomsday Clock, which is starting in November, which will be great, runs 12 to 13 months or so. So metal ends well before that. So we have a period in between when Doomsday Clock ends and we kind of catch up to it. And when metal ends, a window there to go really bonkers and have stuff not that's sort of shocking or sensational, but have really good story engines come out of the story where, you know, the things that they find and discover spin stories forward for Superman, Wonder Woman, and all of that. So it has very big effects in the DCU in multiple ways, and it leads to new series that are coming out, but also big story points within the series that are involved in it now. Superman, Wonder Woman, you know, Batman, Flash. So yeah, it's one of those things where I feel like an event, I was never out to be like, let's kill everybody or kill people or that stuff. I love events where it ends on something that spins story that's additive, where you're like, oh, whoa, they're going in that direction because this crazy new thing happened. So that's kind of what we're going for. So it'll have big effects.
Right there.
So,
Sorry. Back in, yeah.
all right. When the decision was made to bring Dream into Metal, and you got the blessing, as it were, from Neil Gaiman, is there significance in, or what was your decision process in using Daniel as opposed to Morpheus? Well, then the second part of the question is, does that potentially open the door? I think Sandman's maybe the most important comic, at least in my life. And to see it brought into main continuity is pretty cool. Is there talks of potentially the Endless showing up? Has there been talks on an editorial level of using the Endless more?
Well, I think this is a good testing ground for it. I mean, the way that I decided to use Dream, I mean, it was over a year ago when I was thinking about that beat, and what it would be was I kept thinking, well, if the Dark Multiverse is a place where all your hopes and dreams and fears live, what would be the most permeable aspect, or what would be affected by that thing being off balance? Well, the dreaming would be affected. And the guide for all of this, or someone that comes in and his big moment's really in issue 4, the most perfect sort of guide for this would be Dream, would be Daniel. And I picked Daniel just because Daniel is who Neil has in that mantle right now, as opposed to Morpheus. I didn't want to start saying, well, look, he was very, the funny thing about Neil, and then I'll shut up, was like, I wrote him this long email that was sort of like, and I've had the pleasure of meeting him over the years.
For that.
It was not emojis. It was like, I've had the pleasure of getting to know him over the years a few times and hung out with him. And my favorite Neil story was we were in San Francisco for a Vertigo thing and having dinner, and he was telling a story about the oldest shoe store in London and this secret thing beneath it where they have the molds of feet called the lasts of the dead, and the lasts are the things of all the feet of all the people that have died, like molds of them for shoes. And he saw me all stressed out, and he was like, "What's the matter, Scott?" And I was like, I'm just worried about Batman and all this stuff. And he was like, oh, Scott, he's like, right now you're worried, you're not good enough. Very soon you'll be worried you used to be better. So it doesn't end, that's great. But anyway, I wrote him an email and I was like, this is how Dream would be used. If I'll only do it obviously with your blessing. I would never try and do it without you. I'd love your advice and everything. And he literally just wrote back, I love it, go for it. And I was like, well, but I can elaborate on it. I love it, go for it. And so I've sent him everything, and obviously I show him everything, but he's been incredible. And so, I think it's kind of a test. If you guys like it and it works, and, I wanted to make sure he's a really good, relevant role in it, then maybe there will be a chance to kind of integrate more characters from that mythology into the DCU.
Yeah.
Hey, I might be shifting gears a little bit here, but biggest thing I love about comics is the rich character history that DC and Marvel in particularly have. Batman being one of them, going back to the 30s, and I love seeing how some of the older stuff that was done is kind of, I don't want to say rehashed, but life breathed back into it. Where have you guys gotten your inspiration, like plot points or style, when you're drawing? From previous writers and artists, Batman writers and artists.
Yeah, I'll go first. Well, for me, I mean, because a lot of people ask me, why does my Batman look the way my Batman looks? And, not a lot of thought, conscious thought went into it. I mean, there was only a couple specific things that I, wanted to do. But what I tell everybody is, everything that you've seen with Batman, chances are it's most of the stuff that I've seen, with Batman. When I was growing up, you know, and my mother would grab me a couple, you know, old comic books from some order they handed to me from my older cousin or something. Probably the first Batman I saw was maybe Aparo or something like that. I don't recall at this point. But and then Neil Adams, and then they had the '66 TV show, and you have the cartoon on TV, and so all this stuff, the movies, and the, you know, all this stuff comes to you, and it goes into your head, and each of us, you know, have a different blender, right? And so my blender took these parts and my Batman came out. The conscious part that was it. I really loved when Frank Miller did Dark Knight Returns and Batman was wired up to the lamppost to power his armor to fight Superman, and that helmet, that flat bullnose helmet, just thrilled me. And so when I came on Batman, I hadn't worked with him. Jim Lee had designed all the 52 costumes, so I couldn't do exactly what I wanted to do from the start. And but that was one of the things I wanted to do. And then there was things that bothered me that I didn't feel I wanted for my Batman. And a couple of those things were, you know, the wrinkly cowl. And I understand why artists do it, because they're trying to show his emotions. And I felt I could do that without having the wrinkly brow, because I go, what is that? You spray painted on? And it was similar with, you know, how ripped he was, which was like every single superhero is a contest-ready bodybuilder with 3% body fat. And I go, I didn't want that for my Batman. I wanted my Batman to be a slab of meat, so that when you saw him in the dark, it was just this monolith, just this slab that looked dense and hard, and then if you bump into him, you break your shoulder. Because I've known some very big, dangerous people, and they weren't 3% body fat, and trust me, you never want to mess with these guys. And so that's what I wanted for my Batman. And so those were the conscious thoughts, and that's why you get that very wide traps that come off of his neck and give it this slap. So you know, this much Frank Miller, and the rest is subconscious stuff that just came from all the stuff we've all seen. But then somebody said to me, goes, do you realize, you know, it reminds me a little like the Space Ghost. And I went, I loved Space Ghost. I used to watch the cartoon. I even had the coloring book. I remember having the coloring book. So, you know, on a subconscious level, he creeped into my Batman, because then I looked at him and I go, damn it, yes. You know, all I gotta do is not put any 3 buttons on the buttons, and, you know, I'll be okay. But that's how I came to my visuals. And so then when I get to redo his costume in the last, you know, issue 50, that's when I got to do what I want to do. So in profile, it's pretty flat. There's not that index for the brow. It goes straight down, and it's very featureless, very black. I imagine that it's like light-absorbing material, which instead of reflective, so that he can really be stealthy. And I cut the slap-like thing. And then what I did is I tried to give little nods to everything we've done. Like he brought the purple gloves in Zero. I made the lining of the cape that color. And when we had Gordon, I designed a new logo, and I kept that logo for him. So our last Batman is kind of like you know, an appreciation of everything we've done all together, and from things I wanted to do from day one when I started. And Scott?
Yeah, for me, I think, you know, writing him, it's so intimidating when you start thinking about all the versions of him that have come before that have influenced you. So I had great advice from Grant Morrison, actually, it was like right when I was starting, and it was before I was doing 0 Year and I was considering it, and I see him every year at San Diego. Usually we just bump into each other, but then we try and make plans to at least meet up for a bit. And he was like, you know what you need to do to feel better? You have to give him a birth, and you have to give him a death. You have to know how your Batman's going to begin and end. And once you do that, you'll feel ownership over him enough that then you can pull from continuity in all kinds of crazy ways, because you'll feel like you've constructed him from the ground up, and therefore it doesn't matter if you decide, well, I want to take from this story or this story, because the core of him or the DNA of him is your own, you and your creative partner. You know?
But if you had a name, because you want to know if there was any creators that went before that influenced.
Sure.
Was there any that you?
Yeah, tons. I mean, so my biggest influences were Frank Miller, obviously, is the top, because that Dark Knight Returns came out when I was 10. And then Year One right after. And, you know, I lived in New York, I grew up in New York City. And it was the first time that Batman felt intensely real to me, you know, where he was dealing with things that seemed real to me. But the animated series, if I had to pick like 3 things that are like the DNA of Batman, I would say the animated series is up there with Frank Miller as like rivaling for my top spot, because that kept me invested in Batman and in comics all through college. I loved that series so much, and the way they took it and blended Art Deco and 1930s, just all of it. And they reinvented all these villains, like all these origins that we don't realize come from the animated series come from there. Like Mr. Freeze's whole origin is that origin, and Two-Face's main origin is really from there. And the version of, you know, Harley Quinn herself comes from the animated series. So for me, it was amazing to watch this visionary sort of engine of creativity there, where it would just remake the whole mythos. And that's one, I think, you know, Grant's run is a huge influence on me, and Denny and Neil are for a tie. Those kind of, that sort of square of influences to me, because everybody in there took the character and did something really radically different with them, but stayed really true to core, but reinvented the mythos as though it was their own. So those are my 4 kind of biggest, I'd say, influences.
Yes, your cameraman.
Yes. Want to know, you guys work together, do this and everything. Do you guys have competition with like other artists and writers? Like, oh, we got, like, you guys did your run and say, you know, we did this better than this guy.
Well, I don't think either of us have that kind of attitude and think like that. It's interesting that you asked that, because I just did a roundtable, and present there was Jim Lee, JRJR, a couple other guys and the girls, and the question came up about that, and the only one who shared the way I think was Andy, in that we don't compete with other guys. We don't look at other guys' work to go, or girls' work to see, you know, wow, you know, and can I do it better? You know, I'm fully aware of all the great talent that's out there. I think the artistry that's out there is unprecedented, and I'm aware of them, and I come across it, but I don't look at it closely for a couple of reasons. One is I don't want to steal something, because of course I'm going to steal something. If I really like it, I'm going to steal something. And at this point in my career, you know, I think it's more important to stay true to my own feeling, vision, and style that I've developed, instead of going and stealing. And then the worst thing that could possibly happen, you see something, get intimidated by it, and go, oh man, you know, that's so awesome, and I'm not good enough, or can I do better? And so I don't think that's a productive way. And these other guys, though, if you talk to Jim and JR, they do, and you know, and I go, well, good, then you guys watch me. I'm not going to watch you. You know, everybody's got great talent, and so I really just stay focused on what's in front of me and try and do my best, because I think anywhere in life, if you compete with others, you're gonna, you know, it's like a dog chasing its tail kind of thing, and it can be productive to be to have competitive nature, but I think that the one you should always compete with in all of life, every aspect of your life, is only with yourself. How do I make a better version of me? And that's my whole philosophy in life, and so I stick to just my craft.
You know, he knows I'm the same way. I look at everything, and I probably, you know, I'm not competitive at all with other writers in that regard. I love the collaborative aspect of it, which is one of the joys of metal. But I'm constantly reading things by up-and-coming writers and stuff to up my own game, because I get inspired by it. I get intimidated sometimes too, but it makes me then sit back. It's a great feeling when you read something, you're like, God, could I have done that? And you're like, I'm going to try something that's, you know, like that. And he makes fun of me a little bit, because I teach incoming writers at DC now, and he's always like, you're training your replacement. which might be true, maybe. But what I genuinely believe in my like heart of hearts is that if I do my job right, it's the opposite, where I'm teaching them to have a unique voice that's theirs based on their passions and their interests and how they write through these characters in that regard. And it keeps me honest about doing that, instead of me thinking, what's going on in Batman now, and I love, you know, Tom's a great friend and that stuff, or what's going on in Superman or whatever, and am I living up to that? It keeps me thinking, like, just like he said, how do I look at everything I've done and do something that surprises me about myself, regardless of what anyone else is doing? You know, how do I do something that is more impressive to me or inspiring to me to work on and more personal than anything before? And just, you're in conversation with yourself at a certain point. You know, it's the only way to be. Otherwise, you'll start looking around, and like he said, you know, you intimidated, and then you see unfairness. Why did this person get this? Or it's a totally toxic.
And it's different than
environment.
sports. Sports, you have to be competitive. You have to compete against others. You know, and it's not like that. And because it's your creativity is subjective to those who are consuming it, and so it's really the crowd that either likes you or doesn't like you, and so. You know, they've liked people that I can't understand why they like them. So all the more reason not to try and compete with others and stick with you. But my advice to you is don't teach them all you want, but just don't teach them the final vibrating call. That's the last one you keep, you know. The Shaolin master always keeps one so that he can beat the student.
That one, that punch, it's like...
I guess we're ready to sign the boss man right here.
Yeah.
And you see, I don't want to mess with him, right?
Yeah.
So. All right, so we'll come over here then.
All right.
Thank you guys. Thank you guys for talking to us. It's great.
Got the last question.
Come on, guys. I'll get you all up in the center.